Wow. Okay, that is great. Welcome, everybody. I have started to record the call, and we had quite a few people sign up. So we're just kind of chit-chatting here while more people attend. So we have just thrown it down. I have a little bit of juicy volunteer engagement gossip to share. And if people have a guess, and you're welcome to put your guess in the chat box, and the person who wins or comes the closest will win a $5 gift card from Mark. That's, yeah. So like anything goes. I will say it has to do with the profession. So yeah, but I totally get that too about people move on, and that's how life goes for sure. Yeah, I think so.
I like that, Kate.
We're all going to get fair market value. I love that.
Yes, Brenda. Yes. Oh my, that's my favorite answer. No one's gonna top that.
I like that.
Can someone please email her that, because that's awesome.
Oh, that
Good
is
job, Kate.
We are going to go ahead and jump into the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about why we're here today, and just briefly a little bit about Alive and our mission and our vision. And this has been the same vision and mission we've had for the past 12 years as we've been an organization. And really it is about collaborating and connecting and really providing professional development that's important. And something that Alive has found over the past years is that it's really important to help build connections and camaraderie in these local associations. And our intention is not to be that entity that says you have to do it this way. It's more like, here's all these options you have, and do whatever works best in your community. And we found a chance when we can get together and connect and share things that work and things that don't work, and successes, that has been really helpful. So we're really glad you're all here today. Like I said, we do have the recording, which we'll share, as well as the slide deck afterwards. There's going to be a ton of information and links. So we do have 90 minutes scheduled for the call. So if you feel like you're really overwhelmed, don't freak out. It's okay. And that's why we're here for each other. So just to talk a little bit about the membership and how that works, if you're here, you are probably part of a local association. That's that professional association membership. And sometimes I know there are a few people that might be on the call today that are an individual member or considering joining as their professional association. So we just have this quick slide up here that you can see the difference between the two. If you've got any questions about that, you can always contact me. Now I'll make another quick announcement before my slides are over, which is right now, is that I have a quick announcement. So you've got about 30 seconds to put in the chat box to guess what my little juicy piece of, it's not really gossip, it's true, but you may be among the first to hear it. And so if you have a guess, whoever comes closest gets a $5 gift card from Mark to Dairy Queen. Who doesn't like ice cream? Clearly I do. So I'm, just as let's see, I'm gonna count down. Jeopardy music. Welcome everybody. And while we're talking, please feel free to put your name and the local association that you're with and where you're from in the chat box so we can all see. We wanted to get right to all this content rather than a ton of networking, but feel free to network via the chat box. So without further ado, you may or may not know that I'm with Points of Light, and I'm on the host committee because I'm here in Orlando. And originally it was scheduled to be in person at Disney World this summer, July 13, 14, and 15. But the decision was made just a few weeks ago to go all virtual this year. So registration will open April 5th, and Alive is going to be presenting about local associations at the conference. We're really excited about that and the opportunity, but they also let the host committee know today. So like I said, this is not, they didn't say don't tell anybody, but if you put it on social media, I might get outed. But the plan is to have a live conference 2022 in Disney World. So just so you can like really plan ahead, Just wanted you guys to be some of the first to know that little tidbit of news. And I don't
That doesn't sound nearly as goofy as I was expecting.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be back to a world where we could be in person and without masks. I do enjoy online meetings because I don't have to wear my masks, and I always feel badly for people that have to wear masks, in their office and they're calling in. But anyway, that's the end of my slides. I'm going to go off video, and feel free to use the chat box. We are recording this call, and we'll have lots of time for questions and follow up if needed at the end. So take it away, the next person.
All right. Do you want to pop to the next slide? Oh, sorry, that's me. It's already on the next slide. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen. I'm in Portland. To give you a context of some context about what we do on our little team here at the Local Associations Committee, we have a pretty great resource. It's a handbook that we provide articles, forums, and other resources for local associations. So if you're new to a local association or just want some additional resources to support your work locally, that's a really great resource, and we're happy to get that to you. We also have a mentoring program where we can match people who have experience in local associations with other people in local associations. And I've been a part of that. It's been awesome to get to know people in other associations from across the country and just kind of bounce ideas off each other or maybe troubleshoot some problems that you might be facing. So if you're interested in getting some really individualized one-on-one support from somebody who has experience with local associations, that's a really great avenue to explore, and we can provide more information about that. We also have educational sessions like this where we pick a topic and delve deep. And today we're looking at finances, which for many of us in local associations can be a significant stress point or can be very intimidating. And so we are hoping to give you lots of resources to make it less so because we've all been there and this is what we've learned. So we're going to share that today. We also, as Alive have the hybrid conference that's coming up in October. We can provide more information about how you can join as a local association, or if you would like to join individually. Gretchen is a great person to reach out to about that. And then, as Gretchen just mentioned, we're going to be presenting points of light about local associations. So there will be a whole session at the conference for us, for folks like us. We're really here for outreach and support. So if there's an issue that you're facing in your local association, you have a group of people who have experience doing this, who are available and happy to work through it with you. And then we would also like to support the work that you're doing. Maybe it's promoting the conference that you're hosting or other trainings that you're hosting. So reach out to us about that if you want to look at marketing options. We also have an online directory. So if you are in a region and you want to see what other local associations are in your region, or if you want to reach out to local associations across the country, we have contact information, anything from social media links to their website to who the leadership is. So we have some pretty detailed information about who's who in the local associations across the country. So that's what we've been working on in our little team. And to give you an idea, I think the next slide is who is this team? Gretchen, if you could pop to the next one. So we have people all across the country. Christy is in Pennsylvania. I'm in Portland. Gretchen is in Florida and sometimes traveling across the country. So she's a moving target. Brittany is in Denver. Jerry is in New York City. Mary Lynn is in California in Sacramento. Mark is also in Denver. So Denver's kind of cornered this market. And then Jennifer is in Oklahoma. And I know there's somebody else from Oklahoma. So we wanted to give you an idea of who we are in case there's somebody who's in your region that you wanted to reach out to, or just in case you wanted to contact any of us. This is who we are. And please feel free to reach out. Most of us are on LinkedIn and you can get to us through Gretchen if you'd like. And next slide. So what are we doing today? This is our agenda. We're going to talk about what is the role of the treasurer and how do board members play into the financial pieces of this. It's really important that board members at large, not just the treasurer and not just the president, have an idea of what's going on financially, not just for, checks and balances, but also for, data security. There's lots of good reasons that people should be in the loop and have some at least basic knowledge about what's going on financially. We're going to talk about banking, board insurance. Board insurance is a really important topic that a lot of local associations may not even be aware of. How do you work with budgets? How do you interact with the Secretary of State? What are the consequences if you don't interact with the Secretary of State? Gretchen has a good story about that. Auditing can be something that can be particularly intimidating because I'm sure many of us have witnessed audits going on in our organizations, and they can be very lengthy and very involved and involve multiple people with CPAs running around the building. And so we're going to walk through kind of what does auditing look like for a local association, because it's not as intimidating as it sounds. Do you need to engage with the CPA? What is a 501c3 status? What's a 501c6 status? What are the options? What are the differences? What do you need to know about taxes? And we have a really extensive list of resources. And I'll give a shout out to Mark, who put together an amazing list of resources that I personally would have loved to have had when I was president of my local association. So I think it's going to be really, really useful. That's going to be in the last slide. It'll be right at the end. We're going to give you just a whole bunch of information to go home with. So stick around for that. And thank you, Mark, for putting together just some really, really useful information. So you don't have to go hunting and looking. He already did it for you. And please do feel free to put your questions in the chat. We are going to, Brittany is actually going to be compiling questions and batching things under similar topics. And at the end, we're going to go through, Brittany is giving a shout. We're going to go through at the end and kind of by topic sort through the questions and get as many things as we can answered. We're also going to be breaking out into smaller groups so we can bounce ideas off of each other, and then we'll be reporting back to the larger groups so that everybody kind of is in the loop about what we talked about. So that's what we're looking at for today. And next slide. All right, I think I'm holding it over to Mark. Mark.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Smith, and this is my 4th year serving on the executive committee and as a board member for Alive. I also served for 9 years on my local Colorado Dovia and 2 years as president. So quite a great experience there. I have to tell you that some of my favorite people in this world are people that I met during my time there on the board of Dovia. So we have all types of associations joining us today. Everybody from newer associations to ones that have been around almost 50 years. So that's pretty exciting. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. And we have items for the local associations to consider when it comes to your finances and financial matters. Now, as many of us have seen this past year, finances can be a big or small issue, and they can affect everyone around you. And local associations were not immune to the economic challenges and, of course, everyday life. So even though we have seen some really great success stories, we also know that we've seen some of our local associations across the country dissolve and disappear over the last several years. And we just can't sit by and let that happen. So today we talk, right? Some things may or may not pertain to you for your local association, but we feel that knowledge is power. We have heard so many stories over the years, and we're going to do what we can to keep some of those challenges from coming your way. We're also going to ask for you to share some of your experiences with the group as well, because we're all here to learn from each other, right? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk about the role of the treasurer. So it's fun, right? It's exciting. It's a pivotal role that supports the whole inner and outer working of your association. Now, some of these items only happen once a year, but they're critical to the success. You have everything from records management to risk and compliance, to technology, to banking, to standards, to guidelines from the federal government, right? To efficiency. And potentially some of you even have investments that we'll just touch on briefly there. So there's a lot of pieces to the role of a treasurer, and it isn't just a once a year kind of thing. It's quite heavily involved. Next slide. Now we'll talk a little bit about the role of the board members that are not the treasurer. There are so many pieces that matter for the treasurer. The first, of course, is going to be your bylaws. What kind of items are in your bylaws that help govern and decide how that treasurer position operates? Is there a term limit? How often can they serve? Those things really matter. And so I always encourage people to look at the bylaws and see what are the important pieces that matter to finance, and do they need to be updated from time to time? I know several associations that have gone back to their annual meeting and updated their bylaws to reflect things that are more current. You'll also have an awful lot of policies and procedures. Do you have a gift policy? Do you have a policy on how many people sign checks? Do you have a policy on how things go? And then, of course, how is the procedure for that? The policy is what has to be done, and the procedure is how it gets done. So is there a procedure in place for getting checks in? I know here at our local Dobia, back in the day, we didn't take any electronic payments. So everything had to be mailed to a PO box. And that would cause an awful lot of delay. We'd have people email us and say, hey, have you received my check yet? And so that was a real problem back then for us. And so you might want to look at your policies and procedures and see how those integrate with all of the pieces that we're going to talk about today. And do those need to be updated as well? Sometimes those are older and they don't get looked at as often. And then I also think we need to look at what are the processes. Like I was talking about that check. Is there a better way to do it? Is there a better way to move forward? From time to time, should you look at the way the process is happening? And is there room for optimization within that? I know that there are several additional roles that board members can fill in addition to what they're doing. They can serve on the finance committee. They can serve on the audit review committee. The most important thing is they're responsible for the invoices and donations or dues potentially for the areas that they're overseeing. And so what is the process that you make sure that check gets paid, or that invoice get paid, or that new members get onboarded correctly and that their payment gets accepted? So those are critical things. And I know, Jerry, I think you had a thought about this as well. So if you don't mind unmuting and sharing your thought with us.
With NIAVA, there's a real close relationship between the treasurer and the president, because the membership committee needs to know who's a new member, who's a renewing member, who's like about to their membership about to expire, who's lapsed. So we're fortunate here with NIAVA that we have I'm chair of membership committee this year, and I have a real close relationship with Dana, our treasurer, and Shana, our president.
And that's critical. It takes the whole village to make those things happen. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate you sharing that. Next slide. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about banking. It can be very complex, or it can be simple, depending on how you look at it, right? So there are a lot of different categories that go into banking. First, you have a banking account and a savings account, checking and savings. Is it interest bearing? I often think about the location of where the bank is. I see an awful lot of online only banks popping up, and that could be a real challenge for local associations. So, and perhaps your main branch is in another part, different city. Here in Colorado, we had a branch that was way out east that actually was the one that set up the account. And so that's where we had to go to do any changes. And that was rather cumbersome for us to make those things happen. What are the fees that happen with those banks? Is there a monthly service charge? If you take that $6 a month service charge and you multiply it by 5 years, you're talking about a pretty good sum of money that's going towards a bank. So I think it's important to look at some of those pieces. Some people it's automatic, but for some, you might really want to look into those things. If you have a new treasurer assigned, what is the process for that? What does the bank need? What are the forms that have to be filled out? If you're closing an account, the same with that. There's always a process and always forms that need to be done for that. Do you use a PO box or a physical address? I know some local associations that had a physical address, and when the treasurer moved on, they had to change that physical address time and time again. That can really cause a lot of delay in getting the process done and in finding out what's supposed to be coming in. a PO box is highly recommended if you can. That way, if anybody changes hands, you still have access to the checks coming in. You still have access to any of the other documentation. What happens is people often look back at one of your older items and see where to mail that information. And so if that was a physical address, it may not be a current information. Then about fiscal agent documentation. We were fortunate enough that we actually had all the funds from our local volunteer center that we managed for many years. And so we had to have the proper documentation for the bank that we were allowed to do that, and for who we were serving the fiscal agent for as well. Thank goodness that's changed over the last many years, and now they've got their own robust program going. But we were a fiscal agent documentation for a long time. We did that. And then for writing checks, electronic payment options. You know, I look at how the mobile app is just changed everything for folks. Do you use that opportunity, or are you still handwriting checks? Are you tracking your statements? Are you doing monthly balance? And on a rare occasion, is there enough money in your budget that you could put some money into a CD or a money market, right? I know that's very rare, but I have seen associations do that, to just looking forward as they do those things. So do we have anybody with a banking story they want to share? You do, go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, give it just another moment.
Mark, I don't know if this is a good place to insert this, but I might choose now to insert that what we did at Nova in Portland is we hired a bookkeeper, and it was the only paid person that we had. The rest was, of course, volunteer board members, but we did pay a bookkeeper, and they did accounts receivable. They also managed our PO box. They also helped us with our audit, and they also helped us with taxes. It's more affordable than you might think to hire a bookkeeper who does bookkeeping for a lot of different companies and local and associations and nonprofits, small nonprofits, things like that. That was something that was really useful for us, especially so that no board members were receiving money. We did accounts payable, we paid our presenters, we paid venue fees and catering and things like that, but none of us received any money. So for just basic security purposes, to make sure nothing weird is happening with finances, that's a really nice backstop there. And it really helped us with the audits and the taxes as well.
Jen, a couple questions. Folks were asking if you know how much you paid each month for that.
Pretty affordable, and I want to ballpark it in somewhere around the $500 a month fee. It fluctuated over my years there. So I think it started out at 300 and then it ballooned to 500 because we asked them to do more things. We were having them do things like follow up with lapsed members and doing some sort of like outreach around finances as well, which you don't have to do. You can have something that's much more bare bones, and that can be a lot more affordable. But I think a good ballpark in my community, which is Portland, which is not as expensive as maybe New York City, but it might be more expensive than some other places around the country, was $300 to $500, depending on what you're asking.
That's great. Kayla mentions that her Dovia leverages the local United Way and Volunteer Center to serve as their fiscal agent, so it costs nothing for them. And Angela mentions that she had a challenge of getting the bank to actually make the corrections even when they've been there in person. Yeah, I bet that's a real nightmare because they're telling you to come back again and you're like, we've been there, we've done that. Sorry about that, Angela, that's not good. Brittany says it's time to change banks. Let's see, Kate's mentioning that being an LA association with people all over the country, a PO box isn't easy, right? So maybe that there's some online work that has to be done for them because of where everyone is. Okay, great, next slide, please. All right, our next topic is going to be board insurance. Let's see here. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. All right, board insurance for directors and officers. All right, guys. So our disclaimer is that we are not lawyers and we are not insurance agents. But in our experience, we found that it is imperative that nonprofit board directors and officers that are serving in any size or type of nonprofit organization understand that not all of their actions are covered by the Federal Volunteer Protection Act. And the Volunteer Protection Act, it's a federal law that protects volunteers against any allegation of harm. And it's a law that provides limited immunity for volunteers who don't receive any kind of compensation beyond a reimbursement of their other expenses. If you'll notice the word limited there, that's pretty important. And I would tell you that the Volunteer Protection Act doesn't necessarily cover the directors and officers from all the actions and decisions that, and of course, board members become liable for those costs. It's unfortunate that that works that way, but it does. And some types of claims you can have could be anything from somebody slipping and falling at one of your events to somebody eating something that, something and they got sick off of that. I know for Alive, our cost is around $900 a month. And I would just strongly encourage that nonprofit boards that fail to protect their organization with the D&O insurance policy could find that the cost of just one claim could be much more than they ever would have paid for that $900, right? So put in the chat box if your local association has a current director and officer policy. Let us know. And like Gretchen was saying, it's about $900 a year. And some of those are all expenses that maybe have to, you have to work into the budgeting. So Angela said, hadn't thought about this. Good to think about it now. Yeah, Angela, I was on board too. I didn't know anything about it. And the more I did, I thought, oh, I'm so glad that wasn't my area back then.
Mark, I did
Right.
a little research on this. Can I pipe in with just a couple of suggestions if you don't have board insurance of where to start?
Please.
So a place to start would be on a local level, going to a local commercial lines account manager at an insurance company. So commercial lines account managers tend to be the ones that manage this kinds of things. We at Nova spend around $1,300 to $1,400 a year on board insurance. It was a policy that was a Liberty Mutual policy, but it was underwritten first by Ohio Security Insurance Company and then by Philadelphia Insurance Company. So we've had a couple of different underwriters, but the person that we actually interface with is a local commercial lines account manager. So that would be a good place to start.
Oh, that's such great information. Anybody else have a story about board insurance? Something that saved them a lot? Yeah, I would say, just again, like we said, that sometimes that cost can be certainly way out, to be beneficial for you. All right, we're going to move on to our next slide. We're going to be talking a little bit about budgets. Not budgies, although those little yellow birds are pretty cute. All right, so for budgets, now we all know that budgets are a very unique beast to all their own. And if you think about other parts of your association, some of those things only happen once a year. But when you're dealing with budget, it's a monthly task, and it's a worthwhile one at that, by the way. But you have special meetings just for budgets. It's because of the importance of this task that it cannot be overlooked. It also helps, of course, guide all of our decisions throughout the year. So we're going to go into a breakout session. Gretchen and Jen, you think we have enough folks for breakout?
Yeah, we have 31. That would be a pretty big, large group, I think. What do you think, Gretchen?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and break us out in 4 rooms.
All right, sounds great. We'll have 7 minutes for discussion, and then we'll come back as a group and report our findings. So the question is, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to budgets? And it could be anything across the board with those. All right, so we'll go ahead and let Gretchen start getting us pegged into those rooms, and we'll get started with that. It looks like Shayna said that NIAVA pays around $1,200 a month for your board insurance.
And
So we're seeing anything between $900 to $1,500.
And I probably will be moving around some of our team members too. So we've got representation in all the chat rooms. We're just going to do it randomly. And we'll be for about 7 minutes or so.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gretchen.
Hey, everybody. As soon as we all get back together, we'll do a little bit of sharing out. And so we'll be able to, if anything really brilliant came through, we'll be able to document it. And if anything really bizarre came through, we're not going to talk about it. And nobody will know, because when you record a meeting, it does not record breakout rooms. So whatever you might have said that you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, you're going to be okay.
All right. Great. We're getting everybody back. All right. I know that Jen's going to lead the reporting out here.
Yeah, I'll actually, if I can I ask Kayla if the thought, Brianna was mentioning that she was looking at, basics in the budget, how to make sure that her budget is balanced. How much should she keep in reserve? Should they have things in savings? Right now, they're looking at spending some of that savings, and what's kind of a good plan for that, and just really budget basics. And Kayla had some really good insights. She was kind of like right in the middle of sharing. So do you mind maybe refreshing your thoughts there?
Yes, I will quick share, and then I'm actually going to log off to lead another training. But what I said is we try and have at least one full year's worth of budget ahead of time, because we are an annual membership drive. We usually do membership right at the beginning of the fiscal year to then have, and we want to make sure we've got that built in place and ready to go. The other piece we use to kind of help right size our budget on a regular basis, and Janessa Waitman is also attending, so chat her if you've got great questions about it, since I'm walking out at the same time. But we use a grant program, and we say we do it at least once a year. And local members, they have to have been a member the year prior and the year current, can apply for that. And then they come back and provide the trainings and lessons learned from how they invested their funds. So it still builds our local Dovia's work. So again, Janessa is in here. She'll connect with you guys if you have questions. She's a great resource, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kayla. Is there anybody else from my little group who has some ideas they wanted to share? All right. How about somebody else? Somebody from a different group? What did y'all talk about?
I can report out for our group. I think we were in breakout 2. We found a couple of things. One thing we were looking at could be an option for us is doing some benchmarking. So, like size associations, we found a couple folks had only 50 members, some had 250, right? So there could be some real different budgeting issues that happen within that. A real hot topic that we're going to talk about here on the next slide coming up was partnerships. We would love to hear what kind of partnerships you guys are working with out there. We heard about the one from United Way, which was really amazing. But who else is in your wheelhouse and in your back pocket that you would work partnerships with? We talked about some of the agencies had a surplus of money, and we'll talk about that at the very end of this session. There was also nobody interested in the treasurer position. Income was a huge thing. How do we make sure we're getting income? What are the risks for that? And then having this consistent helper, and there was someone was missing a formal conflict of interest that they're looking at probably doing this year.
Thanks, Mark. A lot of what you mentioned came up in our little group as well, including there's big differences between very small associations who might not even be a formal nonprofit. They might not be a 501c3 or 501c6. They might have very few members. They may not have any formalized bylaws, all the way to somebody who's paying taxes, paying bookkeepers, paying board insurance, have 501c6 status, in 250 members. So there's a huge range there. And you're right, the challenges are really different depending on where you fall there. Mary Lynn, were you in a different group than Mark and I?
I was in group number 3, and we actually were talking a lot about the role of the treasurer and about documenting. We weren't talking so much about specifics on the budgets, but more issues around documenting from year to year, so that when you change treasurers, that information flows well to the next person. Also talking about using Google Drive to make sure that you have documentation that's shared from year to year, whether it's your budget or it's other documents related to finances, using Dropbox, and also a company called Oasis, which is a database that one of the agencies is using. They have all the folders are there for all the budgetary items, which is another way to organize the information as well. So don't have some others from the group there from group number 3 want to chime in and add a few things?
I think you did a great summary, Mary Lynn. Thanks.
Anybody else from that group? Okay, since Mary Lynn listed a lot of products that people were using, one person was mentioning Quicken. She's doing all of the finances through Quicken for her association. So that's another option as well. I'm trying to find Brittany. Brittany, were you in a breakout?
Yes, and lots of repeats, but the areas that kind of haven't been covered is figuring out how to pitch that it's not just the treasurer's responsibility to build out the budget. It is the entire board. It's a team effort. Determining what to spend funding on when you have it was the caveat, Jerry. I'll let you say your saying because it's good. And then with what items go when a budget decreases. What was your saying, Jerry? I forget.
Feast or famine. Somebody mentioned that they have inconsistency. One year it's like a good year and the next year they don't. So it's kind of hard to plan. I also brought up the issue of like, sometimes you're in the awkward position of somebody who's a colleague has stepped forward to serve as treasurer. And what happens when that person doesn't follow through? And we've all dealt with it as volunteer managers with our volunteers, but it's especially complicated when it's a colleague. So, and that happened to one professional association I belonged with, and it was like, it was awkward. So, the thing is, keep in mind, you have a system for, like when that happens with a volunteer that you're engaging, you need to think about how as a board you deal with that. Okay, now I'm on.
Jerry's point about feast and famine is particularly relevant right now, as many of us, my association included, we needed to scale our budget way back for this year because a lot of people were losing their employment, weren't able to maintain their membership, weren't able to attend professional development workshops, things like that, the things that generate money for the local associations. A lot of those are needing to be scaled way back. And so a lot of us are facing particular budget challenges right now this year. So you're right. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Okay, then I think we'll move on, Mark.
Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. And I think Angela mentions that she's got 2 different associations that are connecting and doing a few things together because, right? So joining a few neighboring groups, right? There could be opportunities with that. I think, we knew that this would be a hot topic and potentially we needed to just do a whole session on budgeting. But certainly some of the things you want to think about that go in your accounts receivable is that income, the conference fees, interest, incoming checks, partnerships. Hey guys, put it in the chat box if you have any special partners that you work with, if it's United Way. One of the things that back in the day, it was a while back, we had a car dealership that sponsored a lot of our things. So that was very awkward. The only connection I can make there is that volunteer engagement folks drive the country. So that was a good fit probably for us. Let's see here what we've got coming in for some partnerships. Look at that, Dovia LA and Dovia Sacramento are putting their heads together. So far, their budgets are all separate, but they keep evolving. Sterling Volunteers has sponsored workshops in the past. Heard about that, that's pretty exciting.
And remember, we have that resource of the list of all the local associations. So if you want to look for somebody in your area, we might have that information for you. If you want to look for a partner in your area, partner association.
Right. Are you doing online sales? You know, who else is co-sponsoring those trainings with you? Do you get government funding? I heard about folks that were getting PPP loans. That for local associations, that was exciting to hear that information. You know, and then what are the risks? We're talking about specifically about, you know, you've got your budget for the year. What are those risks if you don't make that budget? I love the idea of having the year's worth of cushion to be able to get through it and not make that the key of the whole thing is to spend it all. And then of course, you know, are you doing a balance sheet? Are you using a software program that helps make sure that some of those things happen right? All right, and the next slide. Those are just some of the pieces with accounts receivable. And then of course, with accounts payable, you've got all kinds of things from new things that may never have been on your budget before. You know, we were talking about some of those paid contractors, maybe helping with tech, helping with as a bookkeeper. Maybe you've got someone who's doing marketing or admin work for you, and technology. Technology was not a big budget item a couple of years ago. And now I bet everybody has a Zoom or a GoToMeeting account in their local association. Well, most of them. Are there board retreats? Are there scholarships? Are you doing facility rentals? Are there all those other fees that we just talked about, including board insurance? And then I want to say that I heard something in my group that just made me so happy. I truly believe that you should be paying folks for doing their presentations for you, right? You should have in your budget a line item for speakers and presenters. An honorarium is nice, but I really think the value of our field demands that we take that to a new level, right? 100% pay speakers, Brittany says. Let's see here. Pay the Zoom account a year in full to save money. I don't know what they charge per month, but easily it could be a lot. But again, not that it's a soapbox, but every one of you, I would want to pay for doing a presentation. You guys know what you're talking about, and we just need to make sure that we continue to elevate the profession in that realm. So if you don't have it in the budget for this year, find a way to get it in the budget for next year. Hey, 30 bucks is 30 bucks, yeah. Angela's using we are using my work Teams platform for some meetings, so that's saving money by using her work stuff. Okay, and then we've got one more question on the next slide for you here. And it kind of relates to what we were talking about just a minute ago. What do you do with that excess income or savings that is realized at the end of the year? I heard some of you mention that you save it. Some of you put it into programming. So we'd like to see what folks are doing with that extra income. Angela's, she saves it. They're saving theirs. Saving investments. There we go. Somebody who has investments. I love it. You're thinking so far ahead of me. Savings, great, right? Potentially you look at it, could that be additional professional development? Could it be, just like Brianna said, professional development? Could it be, you know, are you giving your volunteers a little gift? Look at that, an interest-bearing account. That all adds up over time, saving. You never know when you'll need a chunk of change. They needed to hire an attorney a couple years ago, and so they had that. Gretchen says board recognition. Boy, great to see so many options. And for those of you that don't have savings this year, it will come. Gretchen's right about it. It doesn't matter the size of your association. You know, there are hard times for all and good times as well. Great, Kate, I'm excited to hear that you're building that into your future planning, right? Upgraded website, oh my, right? How many websites could use some upgrading, right? And then potentially you could find partners. One of the things we did at Alive is we have a technology partner, someone who pays to help us do all of our technology programs and anything we're doing via Zoom. So we tried that as well in Dovia, Colorado, and had a technology sponsorship available. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Talk a little bit about transparency. So, you know, what does that look like in your association? Is there transparency for the members? Are you doing an annual reporting to the members? And when you do, is it really just a simple summary or are there real details? Do you have bank statements on the members page? Do you have a software program that links to that bank account so that nobody can go in and just fudge the numbers? If somebody just puts the numbers up on the screen, how do you show that they're right? A lot of trust comes into play for sure during that point. And then how important is this to the members of the board? Do they care about seeing those bank statements? I will tell you that there is going to be somebody in your association that wants to see that information, and they're going to want to know what it is you're spending the money on. So sometimes it's easier to be transparent about that. And then in the area of corporate social responsibility, you know, the trend is, of course, for all those partners to find like-minded causes that matter to them. So potentially you being transparent helps them see that you're a good fit and you should get some of that money that they're looking at giving. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There can be a challenge though with transparency, and that would be verification, right? So I know that we've got some shocking things that we're going to share with you here in just a moment, but I would tell you that for some checks and balances, you want to look at, do you have an internal or an external audit? Are you having two signers on any outgoing checks? Are you doing that monthly reporting and statement balancing? We've seen, I don't know about you guys, but every day I get an email from my boss saying, hey, I need you to get me some gift cards. Can you take care of that for me? Of course, it's not from my boss. So there's a lot of spoofing of people pretending to be other people and scamming you. Now, I would say that happens a lot for businesses and for individuals. Well, you're not immune to it in a local association. And I do believe we have Mary Lynn. Do you have a story you wanted to share?
Sure. I was on the board of a national organization, small organization that got scammed out of several $1,000s, not a huge amount, but for a small organization, that's a lot. And what happened was we had a conference, and the conference was, of course, all over our social media, all over our website. So it's very public. And after the conference, very shortly after that, our treasurer got sort of an urgent message, supposedly from the board president, saying, please pay these invoices right away. So she did, and without checking, unfortunately. And so the funds were sent fraudulently to a bank account that was outside of the US. And we were able, when we had our board meeting just a couple days after that, one of the board members said, what are those invoices that were paid? And the treasurer said, oh, well, so-and-so, the board president requested these funds be paid, you know, because of the conference. And the board president said, no, I did not. What are you talking about? And so she pulled up the emails and shared the information, and they were not actually from the board president, but the email had been spoofed. So it did appear to be from the board president, and then it was we were able to file a police report and then also to work with the bank to get some of the funds back. But it was a bit of a problem. We did lose some of the money, but that was a national organization, and because it was small and everybody was in different places, it wasn't very easy to just turn around and ask the person. So she, the treasurer, should have called or made some sort of verification there about that, but she just was trying to act very quickly, and unfortunately that was a loss of funds that way.
Yeah, it can come telephone, email, or text, and Brittany says that she gets those emails from the board president all the time, right? I think Jen,
it's very similar to Mary Lynn's story. When I was board president for the local association, and this happened multiple times, my email was actually spoofed. So, you know, people are looking for any kind of public contact information that's probably on your website, you know, who you are, and they can impersonate you to other board members. And that happened to me on more than one occasion. I can think of 3. What was great in our case is that all 3 people reached out to me to verify that this was actually coming from me, and of course it wasn't. And I think what's really helpful is that we had really, as Mark mentioned way back when we first started, we had really clear processes in place for how we paid things and who paid things, who was allowed to pay things, who was allowed to sign for things. We had that all laid out. And so this was outside of the typical scope. I was supposedly emailing people who were like program committee members and saying, hey, urgently, it's always urgent. It's always, this is an emergency. Can you please pay this right away? That's part of the typical scam, that they will, you know, ask for invoices to be paid. whereas only our treasurer or I were allowed to pay invoices to try to prevent this kind of thing from happening. And so if the treasurer saw anything weird come through, he was digging into it more before he paid anything. And so, of course, I was as well. So if you have some safeguards in place, that can really help. For us, it meant that we didn't end up paying these fraudulent invoices. But like Brittany said, she gets emails from supposedly their president all the time. It happened to me on more than one occasion that my email was spoofed and other board members were contacted supposedly from me.
Yeah, and especially being in a volunteer role, in a corporation, you think they'd have checks and balances in place. But for us, you get that invoice and the treasurer's doing what they're supposed to do and getting that paid. So those are really critical things. Anybody else have any other stories around that verification and spoofing and scam they wanted to share? Okay, if you all get an email from me at the end of the day,
Did we lose Gretchen?
I was gonna say, uh-oh.
Well, oh, here she is.
Oh, there we go.
all right, we'll go on to the next slide.
Slide, Gretchen. Oh, okay. So I mentioned earlier that audits can be really pretty intimidating. So we wanted to walk through sort of what does a kind of an audit process look like for a local association. I will say, as opposed to the audits that I've witnessed at my associations, where they are multiple accountants and on hand for like a week or two at a time, and they're usually cloistered in a conference room, and it's this whole big extravaganza. That is not what we're talking about. Our audits would be our bookkeeper, and then the fiscal officer, and then usually another board member to kind of verify the audit process. We're talking an hour, maybe two with the bookkeeper. It was because we had a bookkeeper that we had, outsourced and hired. It was a pretty easy, painless experience. But even if you don't have a hired bookkeeper, it still can be a pretty painless experience. It's important to do, and it's important to track that you did do it. So I would encourage you to do an audit on an annual basis with your fiscal officer and at least one other board member, ideally one or two, and just look through the basics of the finances. Are checks being received and deposited within the appropriate amount of time? Are they being held in, are they resolved in a timely manner? Are things that are being held back for any reason being resolved in a timely manner? Are you having like outstanding invoices that are just lingering for months and months and months, things like that? Are you getting your bank statements balanced every month? This is a lot of the stuff that the fiscal officer is doing, and we just need another person to put eyes on it and make sure that it's happening the way we expect it to. Are invoices being paid in a timely manner? Is your 501c3 or 501c6 status up to date? That's really important. And I would put in with that board insurance as well. Is your board insurance renewed on an annual basis? Sometimes it's like they renew every a year. Sometimes it's every 3 years. It depends on the policy that you have. But because we're all volunteer boards and there tends to be a lot of churn and people are rotating out, board insurance and Social Security or Secretary of State, excuse me, are things that kind of fall off the radar sometimes. People kind of lose track on that. So these are, if you're doing an audit, something you're checking on every year, and then you don't have to worry about missing it because it's just something you're checking on. Do you have supported documentation to prevent things like what Mary Lynn and I described, particularly, do you have the supporting documentation necessary for the invoices that you're paying or the payments that are being requested? Do you have a contract with your presenters where it lays out what the terms are in terms of what you're being paid, what you're paying, and how much you're paying, things like that? Anything that you can document and track is going to be really helpful. And then are you managing this information in a place that's manageable and that's maintainable and accessible? A lot of stuff we work in is in Google Docs, but of course you need to be really careful with any kind of financial information and data security, and making sure that you're not putting sensitive information on something like Google Docs, where it might be more easily accessible by somebody outside of your organization than otherwise. But finding a way to maintain it for us, again, this is another reason that it was really helpful for us to have a bookkeeper, because they maintained a lot of this documentation for us, which was nice. So if you have extra money and you're wondering what to spend it on, a bookkeeper might be a good investment for some of those things. If you're working with an outside person, this is really, really simple and something that they do all the time, and they'll walk you through it. And it's kind of, it doesn't take much from your team. But if you're doing it internally, as long as you're doing it and you're documenting it, I think you'll find that it's an hour or two of time to just verify that everything you think is happening with the fiscal officer is happening. As Jerry mentioned, sometimes you think things are happening one way and then you come to find that it's not happening the way you had anticipated. And Shayna is mentioning that Jerry has done a lot of research on this. Jerry, did you want to add any ideas?
I was speaking specifically, sorry. I was responding to Gina, who said if anyone has a document contract for paid speakers. So my apologies about that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, we have contracts as well. If anybody is interested in kind of like template ideas, really yeah.
We'll be sure to include the resources in the chat box too for everyone. Great, thank you, Jen, so much. All right, let's go to the next slide. Dun, dun, dun. Actually, I'm just going to touch on this. I think we'll skip the chat box part because of time. But just so you guys know, I think Jen brought up a good point. You can have a bookkeeper, you can have an accountant, or you can have a CPA. A CPA is someone who's been licensed and tested and can represent you in IRS cases, where an accountant and a bookkeeper can do a lot of those other things. You may not need them for that particular purpose. So I think it's just knowing where you might need that support. At which level, clearly if it has to do with a lot of taxes or you have IRS problems, you may need to go with someone who's a CPA. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about that external audit. All right, and so for an external audit, some states require an audit, some foundations and banks do as well. There'll be a couple of reasons why you might look at doing an external audit. First, to validate your financial position. Right, it'll give you an unbiased view of your financial status. Your auditor will gain an understanding of your internal control structures and see if there's opportunity for fraud, and help you eliminate that as well. And on the next slide, it's got a couple other tips for you. Also for an external audit, it can help you maintain your tax exempt status, right? Because no earnings can benefit any private shareholder, and you'd want to prove that. You want to show that you're not influencing any legislation as well. And lastly, of course, to assure your contributors, showing them that the organization's funds are being managed properly, that you're acting responsibly, as I'm hearing most people are doing, which is really great. And an audit is not meant to harm or incriminate a nonprofit. It's really used as a method of giving assurance that the financial statements of the organizations are material correct, and your members want to know that, and you want to know that. So those can happen from time to time for sure. Let's see here, and we'll get those speaker templates in the handbook as well. Oh yeah, that's great. All right, we'll move on to the next slide here. So accountability with the Secretary of State. This would be for your your local paperwork that has to be done. They need documentation. Most of them have an electronic filing for their registrations, so that makes it a lot easier for you. They're also going to need information from your 990. You have to do it every single year, so that's unfortunate. And if you don't, there are fines. And if you have a subcontractor, so any one of those positions we talked about earlier, that information also has to be included for the Secretary of State. I would tell every one of you that it's best to do your research for each individual state, because they're all just a little bit different on the requirements of when those things are due. But it's a real key piece of making sure that those things get done. Often people let some of those bigger projects like the Secretary of State and taxes in the 990 slip away accidentally, and that can be where the real challenges are. All right, I think we're going to move on to the 501c3 status. Most have clear information. Gretchen's right. Most of them have clear information that will help guide you. So for a 501c status, it's an organization that can fall into any one of 29 kinds of organizations that are exempt from federal income tax. Folks often wonder if a nonprofit and a tax exempt status are the same, but they're not. They're very different processes that are done by different agencies and at different times. So one, of course, is dealt with your Secretary of State, and one, of course, is dealt with the IRS. So often people think when they've done one, they're automatically ready to go for the others, but I don't think anybody in this crowd thinks that way, because you guys all know which one of your statuses works for you. Let's see here. Dun, dun, dun. And then Shana asked, Nyada does the postcard. Is that the same thing? It might be a postcard. Yes, exactly, because almost everybody should be doing the 990N, which is a shorter version of that one. I guess it depends on the size too. Again, I'm not a tax attorney, so I wouldn't want to give you specific tax advice and then have you come back and say, you told me to file the 990N. I know you guys will do your diligence on needing to be what that is. Let's see, and Gretchen has a good comment here. She says, yes, if your budget is under a certain amount, a postcard is all it is. Can you imagine how easy that is? Didn't used to be that way. None of that paperwork used to be very simple, and it's so nice to see that there's making those things much more accessible for folks. All right, great. Let's go to the next slide. So two major types of 501 would be the C3 and the C6. The C3 is obviously the most common. You can't turn a profit, and you have to be doing a non-political public good, right? That's what makes the donations tax deductible. And then for a 501c6, it's going to promote the members' business interests. So most folks are a 501c6. These organizations make sure that no individual person is financially benefiting from this. And they must serve a public good and be supported by the public if you're a charitable nonprofit. But a trade or association doesn't have to serve the public good. What essentially they have to do is serve the members, right? They're serving the interests of all the members. And generally members pay dues for those. So look into those options if you haven't already. I know there's an easy form for a 501c3 and there's a form 1024 for the 501c6. Okay, I think we're moving on to the last category before I turn it over to Jerry here. And then of course, taxes, right? We all know about taxes. Exempt organizations are still required regardless to file an annual return. Depending on your status, presenters may need a tax ID number, right? And you may need to issue a 1099 if you've got those subcontractors. Maybe you haven't had them before. So just going in that that'll be some of the paperwork that's required. Of course, IRS may assess penalties if they get their forms late. And if you don't file your requirements for 3 years, you lose your tax exempt status. And we have seen that happen to a lot of different local associations. Of course, you can apply to get it back. It's a form and a fee, but it's a whole nother process, right? So that can be a lot of work. And they'll reject your form if you're missing something from your schedule. If the form isn't right, they'll reject it rather quickly on you as well. Okay, any questions about taxes? Form, fee, how much fun is that, Brenda? Let's see here. Oh, Mary Lynn says that Adobe of Sacramento has received grants through the CARES Act. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. So excited. All right, well, moving on, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jerry, I think, for that next part.
Okay, so this is gonna be kind of like a quick review for you because this is information for you to work on. So basically, we've mentioned the resource, the handbook for the local association. The good news is the committee is larger this year, so we're able to do like a lot more work than has happened in the past, which is great. Same as putting together this session. In terms of banking, that link, it's short and it's easy to read. I'm just going to hit some highlights from this. So the next slide, please. Okay, so the audit guide breaks it down and it makes it like really easy. The 501c designation, it's a nonprofit audit guide and it's interfaces with the National Council for Nonprofits. The one that I found interesting was the chapter 43. Once again, it breaks it down to what, when, how. So, you just can click on those links and you get like some really valuable information. Of course, I was fondest of the articles that were shorter. That's just me. So next slide, please. Okay, so charities and nonprofits links, you have access to forms, so it's easy breezy to get the forms. The tax workshop has multiple PDFs, and it's like these questions you might want answered, and then you click on them, so you don't have to dig through a lot of stuff if the title of the PDF is what you want. So I said this would be fast and easy breezy. So, you should, when you click on the link, then choose to open it in Google Docs. I forgot to mention that Mark said I should say that. Okie dokie. So a lot of resources for you. And these are going to probably appear in the handbook, correct, Mark?
They'll be part of the presentation.
Okay. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. I think you have one more, Jerry.
Oh, sorry. So the next session is going to be May 18th. It's virtual volunteer fairs, how our local association had successful virtual volunteers. This actually came out of the summit that we had last year for the first time. And this was a topic that was of real interest to a lot of people. So we're going to be focusing on this. We'd be looking at the timeline, might you involve corporate partners, what kind of media productions you might include, and what was learned and what they'll do different the next time. And also, Jen really is passionate about this. So do you want to jump in on?
I'm mostly passionate about it because people were kind of freaking out about it during the summit. There were so many people who were like, oh, how'd you do that? Tell me everything. Well, she's going to tell you everything. So, usually we're used to having in-person volunteer fairs. And if Points of Light can't do in person, there's a good chance you can't do your volunteer fair this year in person. And so they did this and it was really successful for them. And she's going to walk you through how you do it. So you might consider doing a volunteer fair for your local association.
Thanks. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. Yeah, great information in there. What is Jen not passionate about? We love it. All right. I think we'll go to the next slide and we're going to turn it over to Brittany.
Yes, thank you. So the big questions we have are back towards that banking and finance area. So wondering if any other associations use an electronic mail service for consistent addresses. So like the service scans and then sends you an email that goes to the address that you assign. We do not. We have a PO box for ours, which it sounds like is hard in some areas. So if anyone does do that, feel free to type in the chat. The other one was, and I think this question was covered, but if anyone else has tips or tricks of how to find a bookkeeper, feel free to add those into the chat. It sounds like United Way was a great resource, personal references, but I just wanted to highlight that one more time. Then, has anyone used a bank that does not charge monthly fees? I would be shocked if someone has a bank that doesn't charge you a monthly fee. That would be really cool. That's a great question, Martha. What is the difference between the treasurer and the fiscal agent? Anyone want to take that?
This is Gretchen, and I can and again, I'm not a financial professional, but I can give you just a 30,000 foot level. And because Alive is the fiscal agent for the National Alliance on Volunteer Engagement. So as the treasurer for Alive manages the finances for Alive and pays the bills. They also manage the finances and pay bills on behalf of the NAVE, but they don't, that fiscal agent we don't have any, decision-making process with that organization. So it's basically, we just are holding that money for them and keep it in a separate account and pay those bills separately, but we don't have any control over the organization. Whereas the treasurer is an integral part of that board of directors.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Great.
Lots of great answers for the banking. Bookkeepers, I have in my notes, they're anywhere between $300 and $500. It also just depends on what you have that bookkeeper do. It sounds like based on what they're accomplishing, they are paid that. Credit unions don't charge monthly fees, and if you keep a certain balance is another one that is a good one, and that should be easy to do as an association. Keeping a certain balance with banks aren't charging fees. Grants to pursue that you've had success with. That's a good question. Anyone have grants that they've utilized?
We've certainly heard about some partnerships like Verified, some other sponsorships, but anybody finding any grant money out
Mary
there?
Lynn, what about the CARES Act? How did that work?
Sure, that funding came locally. The city of Sacramento was asking for nonprofit agencies to help them reach out to the community to share information about COVID resources. And so because Stovia Sacramento has this significant, not huge, but significant enough membership contact lists, social media accounts, and so forth with enough followers, we were able to qualify to be one of the agencies. We had to apply to do that. And then we were funded to do that outreach. And so the outreach was simple because it was things we already did or had, emails and websites and social media accounts and all that. And they provided the sort of graphics and things for us to use, and then we just had to blast it out and at certain times. And so we got $1,000 from that. So that was nice. It helped to pay for some of the memberships we're not getting this past year. But I think there's more options that way. There are a lot of state and local grants to nonprofits. You just have to kind of monitor those. We didn't get anything federal for that, but it was local.
And I mean, I think someone else was talking.
Go ahead. It's Gretchen, but you go first and then I'll go.
I was just gonna say, we don't apply for grants for Colorado, but we ask for sponsorships. So from anywhere between, we're working on building this out, but thinking anywhere between an education session. Jerry talked about, I think it was Jerry, a technology sponsor. So maybe someone covers your Zoom membership for the year, or all of those little things. Companies are going to be willing to get their name out there. So you just have to build that sponsorship packet out for your local association.
Also, there are discounts and things that are specific nonprofits, like TechSoup will provide low cost technology. So our Zoom account is discounted. Our Quicken Books is discounted also through TechSoup.
Canva, you have a free, if you just apply through their website, you get a free membership with Canva to have access to everything instead of just the
Wild Apricot, which is our website and database, also offers nonprofit discounts.
And this is Gretchen. I wanted to say,
you guys could put that information in the chat.
Yeah, and I'll say if and I know we've just got a few minutes left. If you want to reference your last Alive newsletter, and there was a short article in there about the American Rescue Plan, included a lot of additional funding for all of the state volunteer, what am I thinking of? You know what I'm thinking of. All of the, for America's Service Commissions, for all of the state offices on volunteerism. So, and there is some extra, not extra, but there is money allocated for the Volunteer Generation Fund. So if you've got a relationship with your state office on volunteerism, there may be opportunities. And one of the things Alive is working on is helping foster some of those relationships. And we'll be presenting at the ASE online conference this year as well, talking about local associations. And we've been talking to their national network about how that local association can be a partner with your state office on volunteerism. So that is something to take a look at, especially if you have a good working relationship with them now. And it'll be over the course of several years. So I don't know that there's a big pot now, but there may be something available.
If anybody finds any other grant opportunities, send those to Gretchen and we'll share it with the group.
Cool.
You can see that's an important thing.
Yep. We're right up at time, so I'll hand it back to you, Mark.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks you guys. It's been a great day having to get to spend a little time with each of you and talk about some of these things. We knew that an hour and a half would go by really quickly, but we wanted to try to give you as much information as we could. If there's additional topics in this area that you want some more information on, let us know. I've got other resources. I've been happy to do a little grant work myself and see if I can find some resources for you. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate each and every one of you. And please reach out if you need anything, because we're here for you, just like you've always been there for us. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for the work that you do.